Welcome to Rumination, the podcast that offers factual and timely information related to the ruminant industry globally. My name is Chris Gwynn, and today I'm really pleased to have Tara Baker joining us today. Tara is the Application and Marketing Manager with NEDAP Livestock Management. Tara's joined us to share with us her experience and her knowledge about cow-level technology and how this can help us to monitor the health, the reproduction, and the performance of our livestock and dairy cattle. Tara herself grew up on a registered Holstein herd in Southwest Michigan, and she joined the livestock technology industry about 7 years ago and has been ingrained and deep into that business, working to increase the knowledge and awareness and the abilities at the farm level today and helping their herds flourish. So thank you, Tara, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's such an honor to be on the Rumination podcast. I'm excited.
Well, I'm glad you're excited, and thank you. You know, we met, I'm going to say 4 years ago. You were in great assistance to me on a dairy demonstration in Michigan where we were training some Canadian nutritionists. And at that time, you were working with NIR technology at the farm level, and that was great help. And so I was aware that this was a keen area of your professional interest. So I wanted to have you on today to talk more about how the technology can help veterinarians, nutritionists, dairy producers to help their herds flourish. So tell me, Tara, why did you get into that industry in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised on a dairy farm, I have those natural dairy roots, dairy in my DNA, kind of, which is your quintessential farm kid turned industry worker story. But for me, I pivoted into technology because I saw the growth curve that was happening in the industry, and I got excited. And I got excited about the opportunity to translate what can be done with the data and with the monitoring technology, especially at the farm level. So it was a way for me to kind of bridge my roots of where I came from with my passion and my aspiration for the future. And I was just recently talking to somebody. When I first launched out of college, I was actually on the pharmaceutical side of things. And so I bridged from there over to technology. And I felt like I was going to get pigeonholed into the pharma world if I didn't get out fast. And I feel like I can always go back, and it was great. But technology was just such on kind of that rising and cutting edge in the industry. It's a really neat place to be.
It's fascinating. We'll talk later about where it's going, but it certainly is fascinating. And, you know, we recently had Dr. Trevor DeVries join us on Rumination and talk about his research and how it's applied and using what I'll call cow level technology to monitor disease, in particular in the transition cows. But from your perspective, where do you see the technology not necessarily going, but how is it being used today on dairies to help those herds?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a divide there as far as how it's being used today versus where it's going in the future and where it could really be optimized at. I think specifically to what Dr. DeVries was talking about, I think he really hit the nail on the head when he was discussing some of the research and how cow-side sensors such as activity monitoring solutions can find those cows that are going to become sick several days or a week before they really have those true clinical signs that the herdsman would diagnose and start treating. So I think that's one of the big ones to really look at is, you know, when we think about health and welfare of our herd and of our employees out in the barn, being able to find those cows early and do some of that kind of preventative treatment, sometimes less invasive. You know, you find that cow that's a little bit off with the data, what it's showing you, and you can just, you know, maybe just give a warm water drench or something that's just going to kind of help bounce her back without having to go to fully pulling that cow to a hospital pen, having her in the regimen of having daily checks given for vitals and having to go on antibiotics that can be costly and pulling milk from the tank. And I mean, that whole cascade that happens after a cow has truly become clinical and found in the herd can be really detrimental to the cow's health and to the bottom line for the farm. So being able to find it early, like Dr. DeVries was talking about, can really help make it just a health event be a small blip on that cow's radar rather than a potentially career-ending situation.
No, great. And sometimes, I mean, never at the dairy do they overlook efficiencies in labor, but sometimes perhaps further from the farm level, we forget about that. But such as some of the simple labor savings that you mentioned in this technology can really have a great payback. What's been your experience in that area?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the interesting things is hearing the stories from the dairymen that adapt activity monitoring specifically, because that's kind of my area of focus right now. Hearing the stories of how they adapt it and really harness the data and harness the power of it to make really macro changes for the farmstead. So it can be everything from, like I said, just in those health events, getting on the front end of them, preventing that crash situation from the cow, preventing that overstocked hospital pen, and all the things that come with that. The other side is, the heat standpoint and finding cows in heat and getting them pregnant. I mean, that's low hanging fruit. That is really the primary reason that a lot of farms start to look at activity monitoring, is just how do we get cows pregnant, right? And how do we do it efficiently?
Yeah, and it's
And
sustainable,
one of
right?
the neat things, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what first comes to my mind with activity monitoring is we're just trying to find cows in heat, right? But then that next layer to it is being able to track when that cow first started her heat activity, when she hit peak, what her hours are in there, and what that optimal insemination moment is. So now not only are we finding her in heat and just trying to throw semen in her, but we're figuring out what is that moment to put semen in her that she's going to have the highest opportunity to conceive. So now when we look at, what are the returns from a labor specific standpoint, and in a lot of cases, if we aren't getting that semen into her at the right point, it's, a completely wasted trip for your guy out breeding. It's potentially a lot of wasted trips for somebody if you're on a hormone synchronization program, so on and so forth. And it's now waiting an entirely another heat cycle because she didn't conceive on that one.
Yeah, and I often think of just physically locating a cow in a pen of 200 to 400 cows. You can spend a lot of minutes walking around trying to find her. And it's just this technology is just as something as practical and simple like that is pretty exciting. So,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so, go
That's
ahead, Tara, please.
Well, so that's been one of the other really cool things is NEDAP has launched a cow locating system that's really starting to catch like wildfire here in North America. And at first I thought this is a really nice convenience play. This makes that annoying job of going and sorting through a big old herd of cows a little simpler to go find a cow, right? But then I started to kind of peel back the layers of that onion and think about how this can change future barn designs and how we implement other technologies on the farm. So I started thinking about that and hearing those stories, talking specifically with robotic milking companies. And, they're saying what used to be maybe a 2 robot maximum pen situation can now be pushed up to 3 and 4 and potentially plus in the future, because now we can locate those cows and our fetch times are significantly reduced and our time in pen is significantly reduced. So now it's not just the convenience of, hey, can I go find this cow and spend less time on foot out there getting my steps in? Now it's we can be more efficient with how many square foot we're spending on our barn space, how we're designing things with our milking system, and that's where it starts to get pretty
Yeah,
exciting.
and exciting is the right word, I think. So, 5 or 10 years from now, what are we going to be playing with?
Well, I'm hoping there's a lot of things that I cannot even start to imagine. But one of the really neat things that drew me to NEDAP specifically is the augmented reality. And so what we're doing is we're trying to create buildable solutions basically. So you start with an activity monitor, that cow side sensor, and then you can build up and add positioning beacons out in your barn, which is already commonplace out in the market. So now you can take that activity monitor and use it to locate the cow. You can bring up on your app, where is this certain list for vet check, or where is this certain cow I want to look at or fetch or whatever, and it'll take you right to her in the stall. And then the next layer up from that is going to be the augmented reality. So those really, really cool goggles, we work with the Microsoft lenses. You can put those on, the herdsman or the vet or maybe a consumer that you want to give a cool experience walking through your barn can put those goggles on and walk through the alley and look at cows, and it will recognize which cow that is, and it will populate a floating bubble or a hologram above her that gives a lot of information about her. Is she in heat? When does she need to be bred? When was she last bred? Does she have health events going on? So on and so forth. So it almost takes like a little bit of like a video gamer mentality, and it really puts you right there in the barn with the cow, seeing these things. And it also, circling back to labor, can reduce the amount of manpower that's needed to do events like go out and do a vet check. That can be a one person job because you got your arm in a cow, you're looking at the lens, and you tell it what you need to confirm in her record. So that's what the next phase is. We're excited that's going to be coming into the market here once we get it farm proofed within the next probably a year or so. And so that's pretty exciting. And then, what's going to be built onto that? Only
No,
the
it is
future can tell.
exciting. And I would warn people about augmented reality. If you don't like magical tricks, augmented reality goggles will freak you out just a little bit. It's really cool. And it is interesting, and it's fun technology, and it just helps us to expand our imaginations. So we talked dry matter intake. If we can take down that, I mean, there's technology out there to estimate time at the bunk and out of feed events, which I think are also very useful in troubleshooting day-to-day production challenges on the dairy. Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. By having the cow side sensors, we can tell so much about that cow. And one of the things is whether or not she's eating, and when she's eating, and how long she's eating for. So now we can take that and say, okay, what is this cow's normal eating patterns? How much time each day is she spending eating? When is she eating? And then you can kind of, if you envision like when you're using a smartphone and you take your fingers and you squeeze them together to zoom out or part them to zoom in, that's what we can do with this data, because we can look at what that individual cow's patterns are, or we can zoom right out and look at what her pen is doing or what the whole herd is doing. So we can do that with feeding and say how many cows are at the bunk and when. Okay, so we can identify, if it's a parlor situation, you can see when those cows leave the pen and go to the parlor. You can see when they come back. You can see when the feed mixer comes through. You can see when some of the negative things happen, like maybe the feed push-ups don't happen in the middle of the night. So you can really start to identify from like a management standpoint, those macro and micro trends that are really affecting the cows at the end of the day. And then one of the cool things is back to barn design and farm design, we can start thinking for the future, because we can see what percentage of a pen is at the bunk at any given time. In parlor dairies, a lot of times we'll see 80 and 90+% of the pen is at the bunk. But if we look at an automated feeding system with automated pushers, I've seen some herds where they max out at 30% of the pen at the bunk. Okay, so now we're looking at a significantly different bunk space scenario, square foot per cow scenario, and that can be really, really changing for how we design
Absolutely.
things in the future.
Just to shake up a little bit of our standard thinking and challenge us a bit to do a better job to, again, maintain the efficiency, the sustainability of dairies that we work with.
Absolutely. And, speaking of sustainability, a lot of this ties back to what our consumers want to see and hear that we're doing with our animals. So, these types of technologies allow us to be a lot less invasive with the cow, with the pen and with the herd, to be able to monitor their health. Like I say, find them in heat without having to be on a hormone protocol, that kind of stuff that really just bridges the gap to the consumer story, and makes it so that, in a lot of cases, 24/7, 365, you can feel comfortable with a consumer coming into the barn and what they're going to see.
Hey, Tara, I want to thank you for your time today, for joining us on Rumination.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Always great working with you. I really respect the work you and your company are doing, and love the podcast.
Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience. And I also want to thank the audience for joining us today. So that you don't miss any further episodes of Rumination, check us out at jeffo.com or find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. This podcast has been brought to you by Jeffo, Precision Nutrition for a Sustainable World. And thank you. Have a great day.